All right, welcome to Non-Stuffy Attorneys Podcast. Thanks for joining us, Ron.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you're a lawyer, an author, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, just like most lawyers should, but a lot don't. I've got a lot that I like to do outside of the practice of law. Philosophy geek by heart, former Marine, and law's the job, but there's plenty of life left to live outside of it.
Yeah, well, thank you for your service. Shit. When were you in the Marines?
Well, I went in 2005. That's the story actually goes back to 9/11. That day I was in the recruiter's office, but I was a freshman in college when it happened. And the recruiter said something to me that was, I think, life-changing. He said, I'm going to have plenty of bodies in here that aren't in college getting an education. So why don't you go back, finish that up, and become an officer? And once you get a package submitted, we'll get you in that way. And now becoming a Marine officer is a huge undertaking. It took 4 years to get all the testing and training done. But then finally in 2005, I was able to go in for officer candidate school, which is like the worst job interview you've ever had in your entire life, because it's we started with 64 guys. All of our bunks were in the squad bay, kind of lined up, two sides to it. And it starts like Full Metal Jacket. I mean, they just did a great job with Full Metal Jacket. I mean, you could throw the clip in, right there, and it would probably.
Is that right? Oh, shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's how we start. Right. But then eventually you kind of move off the regular boot camp sort of thing. The difference is when you're an enlisted Marine, they pull you through and make you into a Marine. An officer candidate school, you need to show that you can be a Marine officer. And so you have to continue to survive. It is like what's that show? Survivor, where we start to see the numbers dwindle. We graduated with about 30, 34, 35 guys. I don't know how the hell I was one of them, but it worked out.
What was so brutal about it?
I think the physical demands, I've often said, in 2 weeks, you can get used to just about anything. When I was deployed in Afghanistan, you can get used to the environment. Things can get bad, but mentally you can usually get used to it. But the hard thing is that when you're in a place that's like psychologically draining for so long, getting ready for the next day, I think, was the hardest thing. We've heard about Sunday scaries. Some people might have that, like they're in trial Sunday night, you got to go back in front of the judge Monday morning. That kind of gets to you. Well, it's like a whole nother level, and it's every single night when you're in an environment like that where you have to wake up and perform at your top every single day. But thankfully, because I was able to go through something like that, there's not really much else that is going to seem daunting or overly challenging, which is helpful.
Yeah. How long were you over in Afghanistan?
I was there for about, 10 months total. I was stationed in a place called Kajaki, which is absolutely beautiful. This was it was a place that it was like the most Afghanistan place you could think of, because it was occupied by everybody who tried to occupy Afghanistan. So you had the Russians there for a while, and I think our dogs wanted to talk for a second here.
Oh my God, I know, my damn dog. This guy, I got two dogs. One of them is quiet as a church mouse, and then the other one barks at anything that moves. And this
I love
damn
it.
thing, I'm like, you're in a fucking office, dude. What are you doing?
I see him.
Yeah,
he's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a jackass.
Mine heard yours, and he's now off being crazy, barking outside because he thinks there's a dog outside. He'll realize that was a false alarm pretty quickly. But hey, at least the alarm system's working, right?
Right. Yeah, this guy. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was there for about 9 months, and this place was owned by the Russians initially. And then the Afghans forced the Russians off of this land. And where we ultimately ended up staying was this compound that was like the vacation property of the Afghan version of royalty for a long time. Now, it wasn't like a palace because it had been bombed out since like the 1980s. It was like kind of a destroyed place. And so it very much looked like the east side of Detroit, but the Afghan version of it after a while. And if anybody's been to the east side of Detroit, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it, though, was we were on top of a mountain, and there's this beautiful river valley, and then the Hindu Kush Mountains in the background. But it was heavily mined by the Russians. So you got to be very careful about where you walk. And it was very active territory for the Taliban. So that made the deployment incredibly interesting.
I bet.
Yeah.
You must have seen some pretty crazy stuff there, huh?
Yeah, I think the thing about being over in Afghanistan, and I was a lawyer, I was a battalion judge advocate, which is basically what a lawyer in the Marine Corps would do when you go out in deployment, and I worked detention operations. Detention operations, exactly what it sounds like. You take somebody off the battlefield because they are engaging in an act of terrorism or crime, and then we decide whether or not we move them up to like higher command or eventually something like Guantanamo Bay, or we send them to the local population. And here was the interesting part from a legal perspective, and maybe something that a lot of lawyers would find interesting about the systems of law in other countries. So the Afghan culture doesn't really allow itself to have the type of system of justice that we have. Their idea of justice was really, if you hear something negative about somebody, you take them out, at least in these tribal areas, or you throw them in jail, and there's really no civil rights or anything like that. The civil rights that we have are way more developed. And the problem that we had over there was every time we would capture somebody that was either planting an IED or engaging in something that would either be criminal or potentially terrorism, we were only authorized to keep and hold terrorists. We weren't authorized to like enforce the law of Afghanistan. But the problem is that the Geneva Convention doesn't allow me to release a detainee to somebody who we know is going to abuse them or harm them. So therein lies the problem. We have to sort of train these people to not violate the civil rights that we uphold, but they have absolutely no respect for. And it's really just, they never really had a use for that because they'd never developed the way that we were. I don't criticize the culture. It's just, that's not how their society is developed, and that was never useful, and they never really had democracy. So it's just a different system.
So what do you do in that situation then?
Well, sometimes you have to say to the people that you're supposed to partner with that carry guns to meetings and have relationships with the Taliban, hey, we can't turn this person over to you, even though you really want them, because we don't think you're going to do the right thing. And that created some very hot moments, some very tense moments with the local commanders, where I would say, I'm not going to give this person to you because we have no reason to believe that they're going to live after we give them to you. And so we would try to transport them to the government in Lashkar Gah, which was a more established government, or some other area. That was sometimes an option, but not always viable to us. But in many cases, we would just release, and we would say, if you want that person, you're going to have to go and get them yourself. And we certainly wouldn't like release them out at the front of our gates and wait for them to capture that person. We would release them in a very different way. But there was a bit of cat and mouse. It was a difficult legal terrain to operate in, and you're making life and death decisions every single day, which was fascinating, terrifying, but also kind of gave me a baptism by fire that has really helped out.
Yeah, I'd say. So what's your, looking back, what's your viewpoint on the war in Afghanistan?
Good question. I'll say this, the big reason why I got out of the Marine Corps and government service in general is because I have a lot of huge concerns, very, very huge concerns about what we did in Afghanistan. Not that I question what my fellow troops did, what my fellow Marines did. Everybody who was over there was operating for the person next to them, staying alive, doing everything they could. But when you look at the political landscape and some of the information that was presented to us, there's holes, there's gaps, and certainly we appeared to engage in a mission to try to change a culture which is not really what the American mission should have been and how American lives should have been spent. And that's the problem. So I think one of the elephant in the room that we always have to look at here is patriotism. A lot of people would say, oh, you have a former Marine criticizing what we were doing over there, what those lives don't mean anything to you. And that's kind of a red herring.
Horseshit.
Yeah. I think that tries to use patriotism as both a sword and a shield, in which case everything that we've decided to do is then blessed by patriotism. And I don't agree with that at all. So instead, I think that we should critically think about every engagement that we get involved in after the fact and try to improve the way we do things. And I'm very happy that we haven't seemed to get stuck in a quagmire of political change in some foreign country lately. There's at least been not as much of it, right?
Yeah.
And no long operations. I was there right around the time that the Koran burnings happened. And my unit was one of the units in which they this happened right before I arrived. I was not there, but where snipers were videotaped peeing on the bodies of people that they'd captured. That's what you get when you put Americans in there. You restrict the way that they can operate. You use them as a police force, and they get very frustrated because they can't do everything that they were trained to do, and they have to do something different. But they also see the casualties and they really want to act in a way that they've been trained to act. You're putting pit bulls out there and telling them they need to be careful. That's a difficult thing for Marines to handle. So I think we caused a lot of those problems, and I wish it would have been a more limited engagement to deal with the problems that happened that caused 9/11 and to deal with Osama bin Laden and the Taliban.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the withdrawal? How we withdrew from there?
Yeah, that's that's something that it plagued me because I wanted to be out of the country. I really wanted us to leave. But I felt like this was used as a political chip that was moved back and forth, and I can't get a clear answer on where responsibility lies. To some extent, and I think we can't avoid getting political here. To some extent, I believe that there are people who say, well, the Biden administration did this in a certain way because they knew they could always blame the Trump administration, which is exactly what they did. But then the Trump administration is sort of saying, or some people could say about the Trump administration, well, they just signaled that they were going to make this sort of exit, delayed on delivering on promises to string the Biden administration up. I'm not so sure, but I think that both sides completely ignored the fact that our number one mission when we put American citizens overseas is to make sure that they're protected. And I think the big casualty here are all of the people in Afghanistan that helped us out. This always happens in war. There's a group of people that we get to help us out, and then we completely forget about them when the war is being used as a political football. It happened in Saigon. I mean, this very much was the fall of Saigon, if you study that. And I had an interpreter who was stuck over there and continued to send me emails and try to call for years because his visa was never granted after he was promised. All that he did, taking down the Taliban with me, detaining people, doing all this stuff, and he never got to be an American citizen. So you got the big global picture of policy. That may be too big for us to chew on right now. But then you have a lot of these individual human stories that are very, very tragic and weren't really considered when we did this massive withdrawal.
Yeah. Now, is an interpreter like that who's been helping out the troops, is he basically as good as dead?
Yeah, unless he can find a way to make friends with them. And I'm not going to say anything about him, but I would say you have a choice there. You're either as good as dead or you give enough information to the Taliban and make friends with them by telling them all about the American capabilities. So either way, we're screwed. They're rolling around in our Humvees, carrying our weapons. They've now got our interpreters that are, privy to a whole bunch of information about how we operate. That's why you protect the people that help you out, and you make sure that the equipment that you have over there is taken back, because we have a Taliban that could operate just as good as an American fighting force with the right training. not to mention, and I don't know if this is completely confirmed, but my understanding is that Doge uncovered significant payments to the Taliban recently as part of a deal, perhaps billions of dollars, which along with the assets and equipment that we left over there, it just starts to look sad and almost comical the way that it was handled.
A lot of what Doge is revealing is comical.
Yeah. I don't get it. I mean, I think that what we likely had existing in our country is it's just the way that people started doing business as a large system of nonprofit entities that were able to exist and get government dollars and create a little bit of an oligarchy. And hey, listen, if that's the way that the rules were structured to allow people to play the game, fair enough. That game's up. Let's move on. It seems like everybody was doing it, but let's shut it down and hopefully clean the country back up again. I'm all for it.
Yeah, same. I'm optimistic. I mean, it seems like they're uncovering a whole bunch of shit, and now it's just a matter of, okay, how does this not happen again?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think the big thing about it not happening again is making sure that there's transparency. And I'm hoping that that's the one thing that comes out of this, is that Americans would realize you have the right to know how your tax dollars are being spent. And if something looks curious to you, just throwing a classified top secret sticker on top, or saying that you don't get any access to that sort of funding, or $25,000 toilet seats being approved by Congress, that's not really where we should be going. And nobody should get that. And the interesting thing is that both sides had been doing that all the way up until now.
Yeah.
That's just how the game was played.
Yeah, totally. It's been going on for a long time. But yeah, I think one of the things I liked about what they're doing is now making it mandatory to put in, okay, if you're taking money out, right, you got to put in a code, or you got to put in a description of what it was for. It's like, okay, you spent $25,000 and it was for a toilet seat. Okay, so now I can at least go on and say, okay, you spent $25,000 on a toilet seat.
Yeah.
But before it was just empty. It's just, okay, let's just take the 25 grand and where to go.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. The great thing about Doge that I would say as well is that I think that this is getting a lot of American businesses to start looking critically at how they're spending money as well. I'm seeing this kind of trickle down effect related to Doge, and seeing some businesses start to cut a bit of the fat on how they're operating and realize that they don't need all of these expenditures on things that don't matter. There were a lot of policies under the idea of what some people would call like the woke ideologies that required a lot of money and funding and consultants and training and all of that stuff. And when that started to get cut, because Doge didn't require and the government didn't require it, you started to see other businesses doing it. And it's possible that you might see a bit of a market jump or an improvement in the economy as a result of removing some of that. Now, the flip side of that is, if that was really geared towards effective training to make a better workplace, we certainly want that to stay in place. So how can we do that in a bit more of an efficient way without allowing this massive expenditure of resources? Hopefully we can get there.
Yeah. Now, do you think that should be the government that's paying for it though? Like,
No. I think that in many cases we have the government requiring it, not paying for it, and requiring companies to spend a whole bunch of money on it. And that was the issue that we started to see. This is a governmental entity, but I can tell you with the military, the amount of training that you need that is not focused on operations is sad. It's incredibly sad. Most of the time of a regular grunt in the Marine Corps is not spent on operational effectiveness, but is spent on all of the other requirements that they have to engage in.
Like what?
Oh, I mean, you've got, and I'm not saying any of this stuff is useless, but I'm saying it's a bit overdone. So you have required sexual harassment training, cultural sensitivity training. You have training on the systems that you're supposed to use to create your retirement data account and update all of this. It's like administrative bloat on top of administrative bloat that you have to do. Then you have your IP security training, and then your operational security training, and all of this stuff. It's not just related to woke ideas. It's related to the parentification of our our government, where they feel like
Yeah.
they have to have a course and then 5 signs plastered on the wall so that anybody will be responsible for any one thing. And it's like, no, give me the manual, let me read it, I'll memorize it, and let's go forward, and punish me if I don't follow it. That's fine. You know?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Instead, it's got to be annual training, and you got to update your certificates. And
So these guys that are going into combat are then studying about, all this. They're spending tons of time in the classroom rather than out there practicing shooting and shit like that.
that's exactly it. There's this book. I quoted it in a closing argument in a case. Figured might as well hook back to law at least briefly. But so there's this book called A Soldier's Load. I think that's what it's called. And I'll try to find it so you maybe put it in the notes. Very brief. It was written by an Army colonel, I think, but it became a very popular book, not in the Army, but in the Marine Corps. And I was closing a case, United States versus Hansen. It was a federal criminal case against a doctor. He was accused of distributing opiates and causing the deaths of, I think they charged him with 10 different patients, and basically running a pill mill. Now, this guy was innocent on top of innocent on top of innocent. I believed him in him 100% and felt that he was getting jammed up. And I had to deliver this closing argument that really captured the idea that the government had layered on requirement after requirement on top of doctors, and then tried to crucify them for not following these very, very layered, difficult to understand requirements that have nothing to do with criminal law. And that's really what we have in the white collar space. We have the government creating process crimes by creating a lot of regulations that say you have to go through these processes. And when you fail to go through those processes properly, you've now committed the criminal violation because of the expansive definition of the fraud statutes and whatnot that they've applied to it. We see that with SEC, we see that with doctors, and that's primarily what I litigate. So I thought long and hard, and I remember how one of my bosses, a Marine Corps major at the time, Major Zimmerman, described the administrative bullshit that he felt existed inside of the Marine Corps at the time that I was in there. And he said, you got to read this book, Soldier's Load. And basically what this general talks about, it's really, he's railing on bureaucracy. He says that you've got this soldier, and they've got a pack, and inside that pack is normally whatever they would choose to put in that pack. But then let's say his sergeant says, I think you should add this to the pack. And then the lieutenant says, I think you should add this, this, and this to the pack. And then the major says, I think you should add this, this, and this to the pack. And then you've got, the regiment, and you've got the division, and then you've got bureaucrats in Washington, and then you've got a whole bunch of other regulators that might speak on what they feel you need to put in that pack. Next thing you know, you've got that soldier laden with 150 pounds of equipment, and he's supposed to then move and shoot the rifle. And of course, you criticize him when he's not able to do that properly. And I said, that's exactly what's happening to your healthcare system, ladies and gentlemen. It took them a couple of hours, full acquittal on a whole bunch of counts. I think there was like 30 counts or something like that. And I think that argument resonated with them. And that's exactly, this was pre-Doge. This was pre-Trump even being elected. This was Kentucky, relatively conservative, but much more limited government type folks, whether they were conservative or Democrat. And it seemed to resonate very well with them. They were able to get the idea that we don't just make up regulations and then call people criminals for not being able to do this dance. Like you see these videos where there's a trial going on in Memphis today, where a young man was killed because he didn't comply with some of the police efforts. But you see these cops yelling, get on your knees, hands behind your head, stand up, sit down, cross your legs. And then, you don't do it right, and they shoot you. Like, that's exactly what's going on with our highly regulated spaces right now, just in a much slower way. So that seemed to land with them.
Do you think there's like so many regulations where it's like pretty much any business, for example, like could be kind of busted at any time if someone really wanted to?
Well, that's by design, right? That's how this process was created. Let's take Boeing as an example. And I think Boeing's a pretty bad example, because they seem to violate a whole bunch of regulations. But for those, but it could be a good example for other reasons. For those who don't know, Boeing was responsible for basically causing two crashes, one 6 months apart from the other one, because of a faulty mechanism that they put in an aircraft. And the reason they did it was to get out in front of Airbus, who was defeating them. That's a French airline manufacturer, was defeating them. And the thing that we allowed to happen was the American regulators, and I will throw big, massive stones at them for this, allowed Boeing to essentially regulate themselves. You had Boeing regulators deciding whether or not FAA regulations were complied with, which is just crazy. Well, they obviously violated regulations by failing to train pilots on this mechanism, not even informing them that this mechanism that could cause the plane to nosedive existed. And that was the big problem. You can read the reports and listen to the congressional hearings about it if anybody's interested. But in this space, we have a lot of regulations. Boeing was essentially violating all of them. And what happens with that? Well, they execute a plea agreement. Then the government takes control over Boeing. They put regulators inside. You now have somewhat of a government system of control inside of Boeing. And the government believes it's able to prop up Boeing's stock price and its existence by regulating it, turning it essentially into a quasi-government entity by the time you're done with it. And the problem with that is it's not how capitalism was designed to work. What we were supposed to do is have, well, democracy and capitalism work together to have clear, common sense rules and regulations, and those that violate them go down, and they go down hard. Those that don't violate them survive. But instead, there's a system created where the government gets to sit and choose who it wants to pick on, when it wants to pick on them, because they want to occupy that industry. We saw the same thing, and maybe this needs to get edited out if it gets you deplatformed, but on Pornhub, the same thing happened. They went after them with sex trafficking allegations, despite the fact that, like, they had no knowledge that, not to defend, this entity, but they had no knowledge that any of that was going on. But they engaged in a deferred prosecution agreement because it's too expensive to fight the United States government. And now you have United States regulators inside of that entity, doing whatever they want to do with it. Basically government control. And that's where we're headed. That creates kind of a difficult situation. It props up companies that shouldn't be there, and it prevents other companies that should grow and live and breathe and want to do well for our country. It allows them, or prevents them, from rising up in the world. There's a lot of Boeing competitors that should be in Boeing's place right now, but Boeing's getting propped up.
Yeah. What do you think about, like, the pharmaceutical industry? So
Yeah.
they've got all these regulations, right? And they're essentially criminal.
Yep.
And they, regulate themselves, and all the studies are done by people that they've paid and all that shit. Do you feel like the government has kind of stepped in there, or not? No.
Well, yeah, I think the best example of the problems associated with this is the PBM space. This gets kind of complicated. I'm a healthcare lawyer by trade, really a white-collar criminal defense, but I focus on healthcare for the most part, because there's a lot of these issues there. But PBMs are the middleman when you go to fill your prescription.
What's a PBM?
It's a pharmacy benefit manager.
Okay.
So the government, and I have to give a slight backstory here, but we have pharmacies, and then we have healthcare insurance entities, and we have government healthcare insurance entities like Medicare and Medicaid. And what the government decided to do is contract with these middlemen. These were entities that were designed to make sure that prescription drug prices were predictable, negotiated, and that the government wasn't paying that much for prescriptions, that we weren't getting gouged, the American tax dollars. Well, the big pharmacies said, that's a really nice idea, government. Would love for you to do that. And then they went and bought the PBMs who had these contracts. So now you have That CEO who was shot, he was the CEO of an entity that owns one of the largest PBMs in the country, and one of the largest insurance companies in the country. And so the reason that they bought those was because now you have the PBM that was required to negotiate the price of the prescription, negotiating with the pharmacy that owns this entity, essentially, and they can give kickbacks and trade prices back and forth so that you can gouge the American taxpayer, and you can gouge the customer, and you can kick back and rebate to yourself in the middle so you make more money. How do we do that? We hide prices so that an American consumer can't pay cash for their prescription because they'll have no idea what it is, or the cash price is incredibly high. They offer drug rebates. The PBM would get rebated a certain drug if a physician prescribed it. Very complicated to explain, but at the end, our system of regulation, by adding more onto it, having this middleman approach, created an environment for it to be exploited. Now the Biden administration did sue and is going after the PBMs, but that's a little bit too little too late. They knew what was going on from the beginning. They allowed it to happen. These people were big campaign contributors to both sides. And the reality is that they were just, this is kind of a token lawsuit to make it look like they're doing something about the problem, but they could have stopped it a long time ago.
What do you think the solution is to it?
Oh, completely privatize that area, I think. I mean, I think that every American could probably agree that if we freed up the ability, actually brought real capitalism back to the healthcare industry and stopped with this insurance system that was created around World War II just because we couldn't increase the wages that people would earn, which is really why we have health insurance to begin with. If we did that, we'd be back into a place where healthcare costs a reasonable amount of money. The problem is the companies that exist in this space are powerful, and you would lose a lot of jobs. There's been a false economy created out of this. A circus has been created out of this, and the circus has to shut down. They have to pull their tent all the way down, and they have to go find other jobs somewhere else if we were to actually get rid of this system that has been created. But I think that's the only thing that we could do. And the way we would do that is, you want to get an MRI, here's the price. Publish it. You can go anywhere you want to. You want to get healthcare, fly anywhere in the country to get it. It doesn't matter. We pay out of our pocket. That's fine. If Medicare is involved, Medicare will reimburse a reasonable rate. Boom, done. That's it. Simple.
Yeah. Has there been any talk from this administration of doing that?
No. And I think regrettably, there are certain things that would be so unpopular politically that I don't expect that anybody will do them. That's the hard part. I mean, imagine losing the support of everybody in the insurance industry. It'd be hard to win an election.
That would hurt the campaign. Yeah.
And I got to tell you, and I think we're like full on political at this point, but I used to be a big fan of Citizens United. And I was just telling a friend the other day, that case Citizens United, which basically said that, corporations are people too, and they should be able to have a say. So it's constitutional for these massive donations to happen to companies. I used to be a big fan. I was like, capitalism loves Citizens United because companies are some of the most highly regulated entities. But then I realized that they were creating a lot of the regulations to keep them alive and to ensure their place at the top. I realize now that it may be time to revisit that. So I would support a full-on attack on Citizens United, or maybe some sort of congressional approach that limited that sort of funding, because I think that there was a time for that, but I think that time has passed, and I think they kind of abused their power. So time to roll that back.
Yeah. Yeah. God.
How non-stuffy is that? I don't know. I think that might be the stuffiest conversation you've had in a while. I don't know.
No, this shit's interesting to me. Yeah, just a lot of corruption, and throughout the years, it's kind of just built on itself, right? It's not in the best interest of the United States citizens.
Yeah, I think so, and that's really why I got out of the Marine Corps and why I've devoted a a lot of my life to fighting back in this arena, happily represented a lot of healthcare professionals with a tremendous amount of success across the country. And we're really trying to keep the government honest. And I really like my position here as a federal criminal defense attorney, and I'm able to bring things up to the Supreme Court, trial courts, a lot of appellate courts, and make some sense of it. My concern remains with a lot of judicial appointments. I'm seeing a lot of judges on the bench, and I respect all of them. They're trying to do the best that they can. But I see a lot of appointments without a ton of trial experience. I see cases in our courts becoming so complex that it's very difficult for any one judge to figure out. Meanwhile, we have this tailoring back of agency power, which I fully support, with Chevron and all of that stuff getting overturned. But now we're going to be in a position where these Article 3 courts, these federal courts, they have to wrestle with issues that are so complicated because our society and our world has gotten so complicated. And that's the thing that is really going to hurt the legal industry unless we figure it out. How do we deal with complex cases? I'm in the nitty-gritty area of healthcare where the prosecutors on my cases don't understand the regulations they're prosecuting. Defense counsel who aren't doing healthcare day in and day out don't understand what they're supposed to be doing to defend them. I respect them all. It's just that you could never learn this if you've never done it before. And this world is becoming so complex and specific that it's very difficult for everybody to understand what's going on. So we've engaged in a big effort to educate the judges more, educate the clerks more, write more robust trial briefs, and really get information about the complexity of the matter to the judges in a clear way. That's been the big part of the advocacy.
God, it's so crazy to me that you need to educate the judges. You need to educate the prosecutors. It's like fucking crazy.
Yeah.
God.
I mean, that's the reality. We have a federal government that has occupied so much territory that we're no longer just dealing with, did somebody rob the postman, or is there a dispute between two states? It's like, no. The label on toothpaste can now be litigated in federal court between the federal government and a toothpaste company. And a judge needs to understand the dimensions of toothpaste labels and the federal regulations relating to what definition of fluoride should exist or whatever. I mean, it just gets crazy. And you can't expect any one human being to know that. Yeah. I think Carl Sagan was right a long time ago. We're going to give a lot of power up to computers just because we can't make sense of it all. And then we're really going to get screwed.
How much are you using AI for research?
I have a mixed relationship with AI. So a lot currently. I think that we're probably very early in on AI in its applications, but we use it kind of a different way. I do love the fact that Lexis has, and I don't know if other platforms do this, I just know that Lexis does, gives us the results, but then lets us click on the case and we can actually read the case ourselves. It highlights it for us. That's been very helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
But also, I've been able to educate a few GPTs and train them on specific rules and regulations, like, for instance, the U.S. Attorney's Manual. I was able to throw that into a specific AI model. So now, instead of even looking at the manual, I can just ask a model questions about it. That's really where I think we turn to for effective use of AI. And that's really the relationship that I've been able to establish with it. Get it trained on very specific things and use just that one. I think if you ask a legal question of the broad chat GPT, it could be the most intelligent in the world, but the way that network works is it's going to stop once it thinks it found you an answer and come back to you. And if that answer isn't the best, as often is the case with the first impression of a legal question, you're not going to be right. And we need to do better. So training it on data is going to be the big thing for success.
Yeah. So you're basically you just take data, a bunch of data, and you upload it, and it's like, okay, now you start asking questions, you give scenarios.
Yep.
Yeah, that's smart.
Exactly. Like I took the U.S. sentencing guidelines, for instance, something that we all wrestle with. I uploaded the charts and the guidelines into one. I then trained it on the data. And I started asking it questions about whether this guideline would apply under this scenario. And I made sure that it was trained to cite the guidelines that it was using to answer the question. And so then it started giving me educated information back. And now I could score a defendant's potential guidelines by throwing a fact pattern into this AI equation. Now, it's not the end all be all of writing a sentencing memorandum, but it certainly is a very quick way that I can get a basis and then check up on that to see. And I think that that's where clients are going to expect us to be in the AI arena. I think they're no longer going to pay the bill for 10 hours of research on that when you could do it a lot quicker. And I think we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Do you view AI as taken over at any point? Like your profession?
The old dystopian AI thoughts, I think they keep me up at night, to be honest. Like, I started to think if I was, I write a lot and I'm working on my first fiction. Everything else I've done is nonfiction. The most recent book is Truth and Persuasion in a Digital Revolution, which talks a lot about these questions about we've got this data space taking over and how are we going to deal with that in terms of like being real human beings and finding what moves us and delivering that to a jury or somebody we want to convince. But I've done a lot of thinking just as an author on what fictionally the future would look like if AI took over the courts. Do we have a machine that has been created that takes a criminal fact pattern and spits out a verdict? Will our Constitution permit that? Or do we have these 12 token people that we put inside of a jury room? But the reality is that AI has tainted this process so much that they're going to guarantee the answer. And here's what I have for you. I think it's already happened.
Oh, yeah?
I think that in large white collar prosecutions, we have the government using summary charts and AI to target individuals. They're using companies like Palantir, which we used in the Marine Corps to do data searches and target traders and target doctors and target, prescribers and people who've violated the PPP regulations for PPP loans. So these people are being targeted predominantly by AI. And we know that once you get a target on your back, oftentimes the evidence is generated to get to the conclusion that everybody wants to be at in the first place. And then the introduction of summary charts and heavy regulations can kind of make almost anybody look guilty. And so the question of how did this person become a target is usually the one that determines whether or not they will ultimately be convicted. And a lot of that is driven already by computers. So we would say 12 individuals are making a decision and attorneys are advocating, and we're doing our best to convince a jury that our client didn't do it. But public defender or even paid retained attorney doing battle against the government's ability to sift through millions of documents, generate spreadsheets and data that can be used to convict somebody, we may already be at a situation where they can tilt the battlefield so much in their direction that there's not much in many cases you can do to stop it unless you have massive resources to do battle. That's where I'm spending my efforts now. How can we level the playing field in this data world? And that's one of the reasons why I've developed some of those models to try to train them. And how can we make sure that we don't lose this war because their machines are more powerful than ours? When that happens, the jury may make the decision, but what goes into that?
Right.
What data already goes into that? So we may already be there, but I think transparency fixes that. The government should be able to tell us what machines it's using. And I think that justice requires fair access to those machines if the government is using them. I've never understood why a criminal defendant doesn't have the same resources as the government. Never made sense to me.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, very rarely will you get the government to pay for your experts, but you certainly won't get them to give you time on their machines that are developing information for their prosecutions. That's not something that they allow. And last I checked, Palantir's minimum investment is like $20 million. So I don't think that we're going to be able to develop Palantir databases anytime soon that can be accessed by the general public.
Yeah, it seems pretty fucked up that they won't let you use their stuff.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, yeah, I think back in the day when John Adams can stand up and fight for the Boston Tea Party shooters, so to speak, he just needed like a really nice pipe and maybe a pen with some ink, right? That's all you had. And now you need machine learning and data scientists and experts up the wazoo. And it's just very difficult to get an edge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of a team are you working with?
Right now, I've got a data scientist working on the project, and then computer scientists as well, that are coming up with some very interesting stuff. And I think that any solution that comes out of this, though, is going to have to be tailored to the particular sector. So right now, we're focused mostly on healthcare data. I set up a company, Safe Harbor Group, which is dealing with some AI type solutions to fighting healthcare cases. And there might be other solutions out there that are available, perhaps in the securities space and other areas, maybe government contracting space. But we're focused on healthcare, and we've been able to get a hold of large data sets that will allow us to run models on how physicians have billed, which can defeat a lot of the healthcare fraud type allegations when the government says that somebody's deviated from their peers in terms of billing for services.
Yeah. How do you monetize something like that?
For us, and very similar to what other companies have done, we operate in the consulting space. So this is kind of outside of my legal practice, but more of a consulting company. And when a particular defendant or somebody under investigation for a false claims case has a need, they contract with us, and then we have one of our investigators use that as a tool, because I think that these devices still need to be paired with a human being, otherwise they can be misused. Use that as a tool to deliver the solution to the client. And so it's mostly contracting on a consultant basis for whatever their rate is. I think that you run into problems where you say, hey, here's a subscription, use the database however you want.
I was just going to ask you that, what your thoughts were on
that gets a little bit more difficult. And I would hope that that's what the solutions look like in the future. And that's actually what Palantir did. They got their start right around the time I was in Afghanistan. We had I think they called him an engineer, a data engineer, stationed with us. So actually in the field with this laptop that looked like it was made out of steel, and he would plot points for Palantir. The reason now I understand is so that the government didn't get a hold of the data, but they got the solution, and Palantir collected the data to keep it and didn't have to give it to the government. They collected a tremendous amount of information about what we did over there, and they continued to collect information about every other company that they work with, which means they have massive data sets. And so very much in the healthcare game, we're behind on being able to get a hold of all of that data because they've got a pretty big head start. But eventually, I think that a lot of that stuff is able to be worked through to create, good solutions that can be used.
Yeah. How long have you been doing the consulting?
I think we're in our third year of consulting in the healthcare space. I originally developed it because I realized that when it came time to investigate and try these cases, going and getting the whole team together every single time to do the same thing didn't make any sense. So we created what I normally would have done in the military, an off-the-shelf solution. We need tanks, we need artillery, we need infantry. I know where the good people are at. Let's go get them and let's go fight. Same thing here. I got an investigator, a data scientist if I need it, a healthcare fraud expert, a certified forensic examiner. Boom. We use them at trial. And I think in total, we've had about over 170 counts acquitted, federal counts.
Wow.
In many different cases, just because of what we've been able to create in the healthcare space. And then that's not even counting a lot of the civil resolutions that we've been able to get and dismissals of cases that we've been able to get because we were able to use the right minds and economies of scale to get experts off the shelf for people in need.
Yeah. Yeah. What does your firm look like? Your law firm?
The law firm is a multi-state firm. We have offices in Detroit area, Miami, Sarasota, Los Angeles, and we've got an attorney who works with us out in North Carolina as well as Tennessee. Because of that, we're able to get a pretty good coverage across the United States. So I'd say very much it's national. Flying to Memphis this afternoon for a detention hearing tomorrow. It's just kind of the life. We have two sides to it for the most part, a regulatory and criminal. So we handle licensing for healthcare folks, but then also white collar, predominantly healthcare, but a lot of other areas as well. And then we have civil. Civil does some medical malpractice defense and False Claims Act defense cases, as well as some disputes with insurance companies. So, if an insurance company isn't paying our client, or pharmacy, or a doctor, we can go after them. But because of that, we've got a good range of people, just under 20 right now. Very, very talented folks, all with diverse skill sets that have come together to do good things, and couldn't be more proud of them. And I think that's the way of the future. Boutique law firms are the sweet spot right now. Big law firms are very cumbersome, and we're able to adapt to this changing environment and deliver whatever we can for our clients.
Yeah, for sure. Where are you based out of?
Right now, I'm sitting in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. That's where I live. I've got 3 kids, and spend as much time as I can being a weird dad. That's about it. But Grosse Pointe, and I spend a bit of time going to the other offices, but for the most part, right here.
Yeah. So how do you? So you started out of Michigan, I'm assuming.
Yep, that's right. So I was born and raised in Dearborn, Michigan, and spent a little time in Europe. I played some hockey, and then went into the military, and then found my way back here. Why? I have no idea. There's other places I'd rather live, but then, Delta decided to create a hub out of this, and if I can fly direct to just about anywhere in the country,
It's a big deal.
Not many reasons to move when you have a job like this. I can really be anywhere, and the cost of going and living just about anywhere else would be kind of difficult from a time,
Right.
Spending too much time in Atlanta, I think, is what would happen if I decided to move anywhere.
So at what point do you go multi-state, and how do you do that? Because we've been approached, by several other attorneys that are in other states, like, hey, come partner with me, open an at-cause law office in one woman out in California, another one South Florida.
Yeah.
Logistically, it's just kind of looked like a nightmare to me. And we're still pretty young. We had our 5-year anniversary this month. Yeah. So
what type of law, for the most part, are they looking for?
For our clients?
Yeah, to expand. Are they looking for estate planning out there too?
Yeah. These are like estate planning, probate attorneys.
Yeah. That's a little bit more tough, multi-state. I would say that the way that we were able to grow nationally is we deal with an area that is predominantly federal and deals with federal agency regulations. And that's where we got kind of early chops into this space. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I realized there wasn't anybody specializing in DEA cases fighting in the DEA administrative courts. And the rules say that as long as you're licensed anywhere in the United States, you are able to practice in a DEA administrative court. So I could represent a doctor from Hawaii facing DEA allegations, or a pharmacist from any other state. So that's what really started to get us on the map nationally. And then obviously we picked up a lot of criminal cases, and then we found a need to expand and actually get people in those areas, because I always like to have somebody local near me for the most part. When I handle a case, like, I don't mind going out to Chicago. I'm admitted in federal court there. I don't need local. Miami, we've already got local, but pretty standard stuff, not too crazy. But I'm about to go today into federal court in Memphis. That's a bit different. federal court in Louisiana. That's a bit different. And so, we want local counsel with us. That's where we would grab somebody. These days, I'd say, though, if you've got talented local people for estate planning, very state specific, opening an office requires so much more of you because your subject matter expert has to be that new person in that area. And you're putting so much reliance on them and their ability to do their job and so much trust. And it's really hard to trust and manage somebody that's over there. So I think that only if I had somebody in another state that wanted to work with me on opening up a practice, then I would almost have to consider it a bit of an acquisition, more of a onboarding of a partner, as opposed to just opening up a new office and staffing it, because you really need somebody with authority who knows what they're doing and is responsible out there. So that makes it a little tough and a little less lucrative, I would say, because you can't really build it.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's like, I know that I could go in, if I had a good attorney, I could go in and boom the business, but they'd have to be good. And me not being an attorney, I can't really side check their work, right? I can't make sure that they're a good attorney. Like my wife, okay, for at cause law office, I know what she's like. I know how her personality, I know she's like super detail oriented. She wants things like way better than they need to be.
Yep.
So I never had a concern about that aspect of the business.
Yeah.
But I could go, to Miami, open up, an estate planning firm, get a bunch of leads, get a bunch of sales, all that shit. And then the attorney could be fucking terrible. And
that's what you see. Morgan and Morgan, easy target here for this example, but you have the franchising of law, which people can get into, but that's not growing a law practice. In fact, I think for the most part, it's growing a whole bunch of liabilities. If you are a PI attorney and you can leverage all of these marketing efforts to get a bunch of work into your firm, and you're able to get a bunch of associates, and you've got a model and you do kind of the same thing day in and day out, car accidents, insurance companies, boom, 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 I get it. But when you're trying to deliver superior quality to people, not people who are reading a billboard trying to get somebody to represent them in their auto accident against the insurance company, when you're dealing with somebody's business or their livelihood, they're going to pay a little bit more attention to what you're doing and who it is. And your brand is going to be out there and at stake. I don't think the Morgan brand is really at stake because the volume of what they deal with, how it's relatively similar across the board with some minute differences, and how you can franchise that model. But with estate planning, probate, criminal defense, those areas, I would be a little concerned of going with a franchise. And in fact, in the criminal defense arena, we've seen some people who've tried to franchise it in Florida and Los Angeles specifically, and immigration as well. And I've found a lot of very sad stories coming out of places like that, because you saw cases shoved down the throats of people who weren't ready to take them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's been smart of us not to try and do it.
Yeah, I think it's a question of whether it really generates much of a margin. You want to translate your business into something that's more of a franchise business model. There's another type of model that could work well for law firms to support, I think, young lawyers starting out and give them a little bit more leeway. It's kind of what we use in healthcare, the MSO model. If a doctor wants to start up a practice, buying the computers and advertising and all of that stuff is kind of difficult to do. Young lawyers may find that to be difficult as well. You can kind of set up the business component and then allow them to operate it. But really, you're not selling them your reputation, and you're not driving clients to that space because it's got your brand, right. It's got their brand, and you're delivering all of the assets. I think that I haven't seen that really work yet, but I think that it's ripe for working here, especially given the remote working and all of that's available.
What do you think? How do you think that could be workable? Like a percentage of revenue?
That's what. Yep.
Yeah, because these guys are starting out; they don't have much money, right?
Exactly. Yep, that's what the MSO space is. Instead of leasing a copy machine and getting an internet service provider and getting building lease space and all of the other things, you deliver them a package that requires some sort of startup initial investment, just like starting any business would. And then, it's paid down over time, likely as a result of a percentage of revenue. You're kind of WeWorking law at that point. So we need to be very careful to not get too big too quick. Although that was a fantastic series by Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway. If anybody has seen it, just phenomenal. I think it was
What
worth
is it?
The WeWork show. I think it's called like We Crashed or something.
Oh,
It was
I haven't seen it.
Apple TV special. Yeah. So this WeWork guy, I think maybe he ended up, I don't want to defame anybody. Maybe he got indicted. Maybe he didn't. He just went down and got a lot of civil fines, but he grew this big co-working space empire, but it was really a paper empire. It all came crumbling down and he got in a bunch of trouble. So we don't want to do that here, right? You don't want to execute a bunch of leases with a bunch of young lawyers promising them things. But I think that right now in the gig economy, the fiver of lawyers is going to happen. It's just going to happen. And the first person to do it is probably going to end up in a really good position. So that's where I would be if I were you. Not my thing. I would rather spend my time in front of juries, despite the government's artificial intelligence power. But that's just me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Wonder how much time it would take to get, like a solo attorney up and really running at like full steam.
The marketing is the number one thing, I think.
It is the number one thing.
Yeah. Once you capture it, you're good. And the problem is that's continuously evolving. It used to be that you could have really good AdWords and rank on Google. Now, a lot of people are saying, I found you from AI search results. So how did I get in there? Well, it looks like Google took the ability to understand how their algorithm works from us. So now they get to decide who shows up in the search results. And I don't know how, but apparently we're doing something right. And eventually, maybe there's going to be, and this is what I predict, people going back more towards trusting word of mouth because you can't really trust too much on the internet anyway, including AI search results. I am seeing an increase of clients saying, I called a few people who were involved in a similar situation and they said you were the guy to go to, so they come to me. That's happening a lot more. So marketing then turns into just being a good person, word of mouth, making contact with people. That's kind of, I think we're always going to go back to that as the primary method of establishing a reputation.
Yeah. For establishing your reputation, for sure. Mm-hmm. We have, when we first started, and this is probably what sets us apart from a lot of firms, at least from a lot of the attorneys that I've spoken with. We invested in marketing right from the get-go, and we started out with 25% of our revenue went to marketing.
Wow.
Yeah, big amount. And we now spend 20% of our revenue on marketing, and we're going to get it down. The target's to get it down to 15%.
That's it.
Yeah. But as we've made more money, right, more is allocated to marketing. So then we get more leads, close more sales. And it's just this kind of revolving, but it's that steadfast dedication to, all right, 20% of our revenue, that's what it goes to, right? It can't be spent on anything else.
Yep.
And you have to spend it. It's not like you can just stockpile it away and not promote. But yeah, that has been our biggest thing over the last year and a half. It's just like skyrocketed with the leads and setting up sales systems and all that.
That's fantastic. I'd love to learn more about what works in that space, because I think that's something that we should do. I looked a lot at the PI people and how they market, because they've done such a great job of getting leads over time, and I've incorporated that into my model. And I think it's not as traditional of a criminal defense attorney to market in that way. It sounds like you got something that works well for you, and you're able to scale that a lot. I think it's all about driving that marketing cost down. And I think that when it comes to establishing attorneys, and this gets a little bit more back to my philosophy of practice and how I like to operate. I've learned over time that often when an attorney gets out of law school, they have no idea what they want to do, even though they think they do. They start to experience a little bit, especially if they haven't clerked very much. They don't know what the day-to-day is like. They start to eventually around 6, 7, 8 years in, they could get very, very burnt out or disgruntled if they're not in something that makes them feel like they're doing something that they're passionate about. And I think that the practice of law often has shoehorned people into a specific space because that's what the needs of the practice are. So this goes along with marketing, because my conversation early on with every associate that I have is, what makes you tick? Like, you can do anything you want to here. If you really want to represent dogs in front of administrative dog tribunals and there is a market for it and it actually makes somebody money, let's go do it, right? Let's find a way to get you there. Yeah, we do healthcare, but we don't mind deviating from that or helping you get you where you need to go. And if we can't do that, then let's get you somewhere that can do that for you. I'm more interested in you as a person developing. But if healthcare is where you want to be, if this type of stuff is what you want to do, or if we can mold this into something that you enjoy, let's do that. And I found that people who are passionate about where they want to be, and people who are really, and for me, it's about litigation. That's mostly what we do. The people that are passionate about litigation, man, they don't work a day in their life. I mean, it's hard work, but still they love it. They're passionate when they talk to their clients, and nothing sells more than passion when you get on the phone with a client and your mind is racing with things that you've already identified about their case that you can do to change it. That really just ekes out at every single person who picks up the phone, and it makes a business grow itself. So I think those that are struggling in their area to really get moving need to take some stock of passion and the direction and see if they need to maybe pivot. And that'll lead you to more enjoyment, maybe a bit more time to relax, and definitely a more stable life, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for me, in high school, I landscaped, and it was like up in New Jersey, hot as shit in the summer. Like,
Yeah.
I hated it.
Yeah.
But since then, I have not worked a job that I didn't love. And yeah, it's I can honestly say every job I've had, it's like, I love doing this.
Yeah.
Right. Even like, one of my jobs right out of high school was valeting cars. I was like, at the time, it was like, dude, at one of the casinos, like, dude, this is the coolest thing in the world. I get to drive all these different cars. You know, as soon as I burn out of that, then I was like, all right, I'm out. And I found something else.
I love valeting cars. I did the same thing, and I loved it because I got to run. That was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I had like a watch on. I was running like 5 miles a night, and I was making money doing it. And it was beautiful.
You see any unethical practices with the valets?
Oh, with the valets. This is we're gonna have to get into this because it's a story worth telling. So I worked at this club called the Blue Martini. It was in Birmingham. They've had other locations. I think they have one down in Florida, but when it opened in Birmingham, it was owned by some people who were known for partying quite hard. At least one of the owners was. And I'm talking like hanging out with Tommy Lee and Kid Rock and Kiss in the VIP area, party kind of hard, which actually happened many times. This place turned into the Studio 54 of my area, where celebrities were there and everything. I started out as a valet there, and by the time that place ended up getting shut down, I was one of the managers. So I worked my way all the way through valet. I DJ'd there some nights. I was an assistant manager. I became a manager, and then was like right next to the owner for a lot of it. And what eventually shut us down were too many after hours parties, right? So unethical practices valeting was the question. But let me tell you, the unethical practices, and I was in law school, mind you, at the time, the unethical practices for the most part happened on the inside of the bar. So this is where, I'm probably saying too much here, but this is where I learned how to have a bit of game, right? We would, when I was there as a host and a manager, we would do these schemy little things. Like, guy would go to the bathroom when he was up in the VIP section with his wife or his girl or whatever, and we would close it off when he was when he left, so that when he would come back, we'd be like, VIP's closed. He'd be like, no, I was in there. She's right here. Look. And you're like, no, man, I'm sorry. I can't do anything for you. You kind of do the whole look around, and he knows how the game is played. So he pulls 20, 50 out of his pocket, and he ends up increasing you to get back in. And that's just like the tax, you got a big line outside. You end up, the club's basically empty inside. You run a decent line so that you can, get paid off. Everybody's splitting tips. That's where we learned how to work in teams and really make things happen. And I would walk out of that place sometimes with $500 in my pocket, much better pay than a valet driver. And and a lifetime of knowledge of human behavior. That's what really gave me, I think, an edge in law, in many respects in life. And hey, listen, it's a bar atmosphere. There's an economy at play. We were part of it. Nothing was illegal. So it is what it is, right?
Yeah. When I valeted, there was a big thing. We'd be in like 300 cars a night. And at this time, everyone there was not a lot of credit cards, a lot of cash and change and all that shit. And so it was common practice. Like every single car you got in, this is terrible. This is fucking stealing. But I was 18 years old, and it is what it is.
Change drawer. Yeah.
You raid the change drawer, and they would put keys in like these Ziploc bags. So you'd have the ticket, and you put the keys in there, and then return them. And so there's like all these Ziploc bags around, but you would hear the valets running to cars, and their back pockets were jingling with. And you just hear him jingling, and I'd see people like look at him like, what the hell? He's got like a whole pocket full of change, like a patron, like look at him. But there would be in the garage, because you'd have so many bags throughout the night, you'd have to like hide them. And so all throughout the garage, there's these bags of change, with like, $100 in them. And so then the valets would start stealing, they'd see someone's change, hiding under one of the posts or some shit, and they'd steal it. And, oh my God, it was wild.
Everybody's just ripping each other off. I had, speaking of valet, there was this server. She was a friend of mine. She's a great person. She worked there for quite a while, and she got really drunk one night. I think after work, and she comes to me. I think I was managing at the time. She said, I can't find my car. I went out to the parking lot. I can't find my car. There's like one parking structure for the entire downtown area there. And I went out to check with her because she was too wasted to do an accurate check. Got the car key and everything, trying to make it, go off, and it's not there. So I said, maybe it's stolen. I don't know what to tell you, but you can't find it. So I don't think Uber was around yet. This is how long ago this was. So I think she got a cab home, or somebody gave her a ride home, and I checked in on her. She filed a police report, and the police did a quick investigation. Nothing. She told the insurance company. They paid her out for the missing car and all of that stuff. And then like 2 months later, I'm driving around this other parking structure that was actually used. You know where this is going. That was actually used by the valet staff at the time. And I see a car matching the description of this server's car. And quietly, I go to her and I say, how long did it take you to realize that you'd valeted? I wasn't a lawyer at this time. I was a law student, so I don't think there was attorney-client privilege that would attach to this. But I said, how long has it been since you realized that you actually valeted your car? And she looked at me. She said, what? I said, I saw your car in the structure. Don't act like you don't know. Like, you definitely know you valeted your car. I guess she was flat out drunk, blackout, had no idea. Months her car was sitting in this structure, hadn't been impounded by the city for some reason. And it was sitting right up there. I guess she'd brought her spare set of keys with her. Valet driver took the keys or something. And she had this entire insurance claim. Now, if any insurance people are listening, I don't know whether she informed anybody of the mix-up or returned insurance money. I have no idea how that turned out, and I'm not responsible for anything. And the statute of limitations certainly passed on that, I'm sure. But I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Not nearly as bad, but we went I was young. I was with my brother and one of his friends. I was young. I was probably 15 years old or something. And we went to a concert up in New York City, and we parked, I think, in Hoboken and took the train in.
Yeah.
And the parking lot wasn't huge, but we parked, and it's like 2 a.m. We get back to the car, and we go to the car, and the key won't work. Right? It's not a click key. It's a regular key that you put in the door.
Yeah.
Won't work. Won't fucking work. And we're sitting there, and we don't know what to do. It's now it's like 2:30 in the morning. Gets to be 4 a.m, and we're like an hour and a half drive away from our house.
Yeah.
And it gets to be like 4 a.m, and
No train,
we didn't.
I imagine. Nothing. Yeah.
No. It was like, no cell phones.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
Nothing. And then I think we were there for about an hour and a half, and my brother starts squinting. I see him squinting, and he goes, "I think that's our car over there." And it was probably like 50. It was like 50 yards, 20, 25, 50 yards away.
Oh.
And it was the same exact car, same color, everything. And oh my God, it was terrible.
Now you can go on your app and have your car honk. Like kids don't understand what it was like back in the day.
Right?
Back in the day when you used to have to carry money and metal around with you, like paper and metal to pay for things, and your car keys actually had to fit in a door. You had to remember
phone numbers.
Yes, you had to remember phone numbers. I don't know how I would survive if I had to actually remember everybody. I remember my grandmother had this, or even attorneys, they had this like Rolodex with the cards in it that you keep organized. Everybody had that book with all the scraps of paper and numbers in it. Or if you wanted to pick somebody up, you'd write your number on a napkin or something like that. I mean,
yeah,
it's crazy.
How old are you?
42.
42.
Yeah.
I'll be 44 in September.
Awesome. Well, I was going to ask what your fitness routine is, because for 44, and certainly that makes me want to ask the question more. For 44, you are quite shredded, my friend.
My wife and I do CrossFit.
Oh, perfect. I used to love CrossFit. I don't do that anymore. It's not as functional, but that's good stuff. And you got a box near you that you go to quite a bit?
Yeah. I was actually owned a box for a couple of years out in California.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where?
Santa Cruz.
Fantastic.
Santa Cruz?
Yeah.
Terrible business decision, but didn't make money. We had a bunch of members, but didn't make money. It was a lot of fun, but yeah.
I have a friend who owns a very successful gym that is similar to CrossFit style, but certainly not using the name or really modeling it. It's called Foundry. It's in a place called Beverly Hills. It's worth looking up, though. She's developed quite a solid following, even from people outside of the area. Just great programming. I've been friends with her for a while, but I was originally invited to do a MRF because she wanted the vets to come down and do a MRF. I imagine with CrossFit, you're familiar with what kind of hell a MRF actually is.
In Florida too, it's the worst.
Oh, I can't imagine a MRF in Florida. I
hate running. I hate running too. It's like,
and the vest on. I'm doing that. I'm training for Mount Rainier, and I did last year, but avalanche conditions didn't allow us to summit. So now I've got that vest on that I'm doing a lot of like uphill stuff with, and it just gives me MRF vibes over and over again.
Oh yeah.
But for those who don't know, you got a mile run, and then you got a mile run at the beginning, mile run at the end, and then you got to do 100 pull-ups,
200
push-ups, and then 300 air squats with proper form. Otherwise, you get docked. And for those people who are hardcore, you do it with like a 40-pound vest. I think for the most part, I do it with like a 20. I don't think I could, outside of the military, I don't think I could MRF with a 40-pound vest on. You got to be
40 is a lot.
Yeah, it's
a lot.
It's insane with 40-pound vest. So basically your entire body feels like you just like pulled your limbs off, twisted them around, and put them back on the next day and the day after and the day after that. But we do it to I guess commemorate, and it's actually coming up soon, almost MRF time, I think this month.
Yeah.
Commemorate
Memorial Day.
That's right. That's right. Commemorate the death of one of the Navy SEALs who was killed in an operation in Afghanistan. He was a lieutenant at the time. Got taken out by the Taliban, but he was known for his insane fitness routines, and this was one of them. I don't know how much of that is lore, but hey, it keeps people moving on Memorial Day, and it's a hell of a CrossFit tradition. And I don't think I've skipped one in a long time. So
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, there's a bunch of hero wads that are named after fallen soldiers, and they're all just nasty.
Oh yeah, yeah,
nasty workouts, all of them.
I don't know how many of them got like built up over time, right? Like how many of them were actually done, because I don't remember anything as crazy as a Murph when I was in the Marine Corps. I mean, I think the obstacle course, 5 miles of just nasty, muddy, sweaty, like walls and running and, you know, carrying your weapon in your pack with you. That stuff was quite crazy. But I don't remember anything that crazy. There was something in fact, if people want to Google it, there's probably some really interesting footage. There's something in the Marine Corps that you go through in Quantico called the Quigley. And it's basically a course with a bunch of mud and swampy water that we have to swim, wade through, walk through like you're in the rice paddies of like, you know, Vietnam or something. But part of it is you have to go through these metal tubes that are essentially submerged. Concrete tubes that are essentially submerged underwater with very little breathing room at the top of the tube. And it's the most claustrophobic, insane thing you ever do, because I'm broad-shouldered guy, so the thin guy is probably a little bit better, but still not that great. And you know, the thing about the water is when it's still and you go through it on your back,
it wades, right?
Exactly. We got a bunch of people in there, and God forbid somebody freaks out. You get the water just doing that. So this is controlled drowning at its best, right? And we know that if anybody were to not make it out there in time, out of the tube, that the instructors would go pull them out, and you know, they'd be sputtering and coughing or maybe passed out or whatever, and they get taken care of by the medics. But that's not the most comforting thing in the world, because you still have to go through the agony of like effectively drowning in order to get through this thing. So we all had to do it, I think, a couple of times. By the end of it, you know, you get, like I said, you get used to anything. But that was probably one of the more terrible experiences early on, I think.
That sounds god awful.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's just,
how long was the tube?
There were a couple of them. I would say, meters? I would say we're probably looking maybe 10, 15. And you crawl on your back, so you're not moving quick. And the space that you had was maybe anywhere between 2 inches to 0 of breathing room.
So as you're crawling on your back, is your head submerged?
So that most of your head is submerged, you're on your back, and the breathing space would be like right here, and you've got your rifle right here so that you can, you know, kind of keep that with you. And then you wiggle. You just do this wonderful wiggle without disturbing the water too much, because if you wiggle too much, you screw yourself over. So it's like, don't freak out so that you can survive. But that's the thing that makes you want to freak out, right? That you're not supposed to freak out. That it gets quite tough. But hey, everybody has to go through it. And those that can't, they end up being one of those, 30 odds, folks that fail. And that's what you get.
Yeah. I think the CrossFit hero workouts are meant to be a little bit of like, you're paying homage to these guys, right? So it's like you need to struggle, right? It needs to be, it needs to kick the shit out of you, and you need to keep going, right? Yeah. Greg Glassman, who started CrossFit, we're friends with him. He had said, there's the female workouts like Fran and Grace. There's a bunch of workouts named after females. And he said, anything that leaves you laying on your back wondering what the fuck just happened deserves a female name.
Yep. That's amazing that you're friends with Greg Glassman. I mean, what a figure. When I was coming up in the military, we were married to CrossFit. I would have given anything for, a few minutes to chat with somebody like that.
Yeah,
Absolutely a god in the world. Yeah.
he's such an amazing person. His wife was going to the box that we were at, and
Yeah.
that's how we met. That's how we met them. And he's got a house in Santa Cruz, and CrossFit was headquarters in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
So our first coach for the box we opened was the head trainer at the CrossFit headquarters.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, her name is Jenny Lau. Such a beautiful woman, super smart, really
That's really familiar, that name.
yeah, she's amazing. And yeah, so super generous. He took us to Santa Barbara one time to see a show, and we thought it was just like the four of us, right? And so he's like, okay, we're staying it was the Four Seasons, and I think it was the Four Seasons or something like that, some nice ass hotel in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
So we get there, and there's like 30 other people, and 30 other people, like 20 rooms, and he foots the whole bill, right?
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Just taking care.
Take care of people, right? He just wants his friends to come along, and we went to a concert that night. We spent 2 nights down there, and then he did the same thing up in San Francisco. He took a bunch of us, I think it was like 45 of us, paid for hotels, and we went and saw Hamilton. He paid for tickets there. The tickets are like $500 each. It's like,
that's awesome.
I mean, yeah, great guy. My wife just went out there 2 weeks ago. Saw Maggie, his wife, and he wasn't there. He was up in Santa Cruz. They're in Arizona now.
Yeah, that's great. That's what you got to do. When you get to that status and you've built a community like that, give back, take care of people, spread the wealth. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, his thing, and I've kind of adopted it myself, has been it's really to help. Like, how can you help? And he saw like what was happening in the fitness industry, and people are paying for these $20 a month memberships and just not even going and not getting any training. And so he starts up CrossFit and really it's like, okay, this shit works. This will get you in shape.
Yeah.
And it was all meant really to help. And when you do that, when you really help and you have that purpose behind you, good shit happens.
Yeah. I agree. I used CrossFit Endurance, not just CrossFit, but to train for an full Ironman that I ran in Finland 3 years ago, I think. Certainly didn't get a time worthy of bragging about, but all I really wanted to do is, no pun intended, finish the race. And all I did was read the book. It wasn't like I had to deal with a coaching plan, sign up for a whole bunch of stuff just to get through it. Very, very good book for a reasonable price. Read that, digest it, understand the principles, and you go. And I think that's one thing that Glassman did, and then a lot of other people after that, is they weren't looking to just over commercialize the space. The beauty about CrossFit is that you can do it literally anywhere. And there were a lot of CrossFit workouts that we could do. I used to like the Bobby Maximus stuff as well, a little bit of a spinoff there. I think Lisa, his wife, trained in my area. He was the guy who I think notably worked with the people from 300 and got them super ripped in that. But one thing that he has in common with Jim Jones and also CrossFit is that I think that they were more focused on actual fitness, actually getting the work done, than they were on making the profit from it. And that makes it a lot more comfortable for me to go in there and say, yeah, I believe in what your program is, because you weren't leading with the dollar. I don't need an Equinox. In fact, most of my good workouts have been in places where I had very little equipment and just a run or, some body weight stuff. I did a whole bunch of lunges this morning that didn't require any big gym membership. And right now I only have a climbing gym membership. I don't belong to any big fitness places. I think that gets us back to that human space where we're not focused on waiting for that next machine that is going to make our life amazing, but we're focused on getting something done for at least a few minutes a day, and hopefully a bit more than that. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Like I'm in the middle of writing a book right now and
Oh,
creating a course. I filmed the whole course,
yeah,
but the book is basically around lead sales, lead generation, marketing,
yeah,
business administration. Same thing with the course. Uh, not going to be super expensive
yep,
but it's like, okay, how can I help out as many people as I can? It's like, okay,
yep,
get this book, watch this course, implement this stuff. Yeah, because like I was saying earlier, that was our biggest, right? Investing in the marketing, investing in intake and
mhm,
the sales team and the processes was our one of our key defining things that really defined us, our growth.
yeah,
But I see a lot of attorneys, they don't really know, they haven't been taught business.
yeah,
Whereas I had a business background, so it just kind of came naturally to me to do these things. But
mhm.
if you're coming fresh out of law school or you've been at a firm and you're going away on your own, uh, yeah, it's kind of like you need to learn that shit. If you don't learn it, you're gonna have trouble.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm excited to hear about that, and I listened to quite a few episodes that you had previously, and I think that you were saying that big goal is to help. And what I can clearly tell already is that even in having this show and getting information from a wide range of attorneys and the way that they've approached it, it almost in a bit of a Tim Ferriss kind of way allows you to synthesize that information and deliver it to people in a fashion that gives them a lot of options, but also is built off of information that has worked for other people. Like the guy who wears the Hawaiian shirts, incredible branding. I think he was one of the last episodes. Great branding. I can't remember his name. Jordan.
Jordan Ostroff, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Fantastic branding. I love the approach. That's one way to do it. Probably won't work for my clients, right? I don't think as non-stuffy as I want to be. I mean, maybe I'll be the first lawyer with a sleeve to
There you
argue
go.
in front of the Supreme Court. I hope. I don't know. I don't know if there's been anybody. Let me know if there's been anybody with a sleeve who's been up there.
We'll ask
Um,
Grok. We'll ask Grok.
yeah, that's a good idea. But I think that seems to be the approach that you've employed already. It's incredibly helpful. I think that all of this stuff, when it comes to lawyers making it in the world, it's really got to start, regardless of what system you have. It's really got to start with, what do you love? Do you love this, or do you need to change something?
Yep.
And then, you know, am I working in landscaping, or am I running a box? Like, I imagine some of your happy times within the business side of CrossFit probably were having a community around a space like that, and I think that's incredibly rewarding. And there's a Japanese philosophy, ikigai. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's something to look at. It asks you to ask a few questions of yourself so that you figure out exactly what you should be doing and what your purpose is. And I love this. I've trained all my lawyers on it. Some of the essential questions are: what do you love doing? If you could do anything, what can you make money at that you love doing? What do you think about, most often? And there's a few other parts of this chart. It's a bit of a Venn diagram, and what stands out in the middle is really where you can operate in the space and make money and do something business wise. And I think you can make money on just about anything in this economy if you love it first, because there's the ability to have that kind of guru status that some people have. I mean, even just an author, not just an author, but even being an author, that's what I love. Um, that means that any subject matter that you're good at, you can now write about it and probably get a marketable material out there. And if you work hard enough at it, you can probably develop a following and do well. I like writing on the side. I like trying cases. Eventually, it's going to be a lot more writing, a lot more teaching, a lot more educating, a lot less trying cases. But right now, I'm pretty happy with the sweet spot.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, man, we got some exciting stuff happening with the non-stuffy brand. That's going to be, the book, the courses, some more stuff that we're we're rolling out. But yeah, as of right now, it hasn't been monetized. But
I mean, I would definitely buy a hoodie right now if it was a non-stuffy hoodie. I would have worn it to the show. Maybe when you have me on again, if it works well, I'll wear it. That would be great.
So we'll have to put them up on the website, right? Put a little shop on there. Order your non-stuffy attorney hoodie.
It's a hoodie, but it looks like a tank top because then there's just muscles, right? That's what I'm saying for you.
Maybe a little chest hair drawn up there too.
Exactly. We used to call that taco meat. Where so you have the V and then the taco meat in the middle. Yeah, with the gold chain,
Oh, fuck. That's too good.
Yeah.
That's too good.
You will always call it taco meat from now on.
I now will. Yep. I've never heard that before. And
every listener is going to hate us for it, but that's fine.
Oh, dude. Well, Ron, thanks for joining, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good chat. I love the format, love the brand. Happy to chat for a little bit. And I think it sounds like there's great things ahead for you. I look forward to seeing all that happen.
Thank you. Likewise for you, dude. Sounds like, I love the work you're doing. Yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate
100%. It. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to reach out come Murph time and let you know if I got it in.
Yeah. Shoot me. Let me know. I want to know your time. I want to make sure it's not like 2.5 hours or something.
It is going to be terrible, but I'll let you know regardless. No shame.
All right. See ya.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you.